This is Money Moves on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Marty Brown is the running back. Quarterback is Carson Beck.
Boykin might be coming.
Here's the snap back. Beck looks, throws it down the field, and it is intercepted by Indiana. Wow, what a play! And it is Jamari Sharp who comes up with a pick, and he runs into the end zone. They're going to call a penalty. But Indiana intercepted the football, and it's not going to matter.
What a moment out here in Miami. That's how it sounded last night on Indiana Hoosiers Radio. Don Fisher on the call, who's been the voice of Indiana football since 1973. What a play, what a game, and a win for Indiana on that note as we welcome you into Money Moves on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. Stormy Buonantony, Jonathan Von Tobel with you coast to coast today as I am still in Miami. Here was the in-venue host for the game yesterday, JVT holding down the home base in Vegas. How we doing, buddy?
Pretty good. Fun game yesterday. Glad it turned out to be a good one. I was talking about this with Mitch on Pod of the Futures earlier today. Last year's national championship was like fine. And then the Indiana game last week against Oregon, not really great. So it was really good to end the season on a high note, which was a very well played and fun football game. And you get a little bit of a history. Look, I'm not big on the emotional aspect of college football like you nerds are, but you could appreciate what exactly went down yesterday for Indiana and the fans around the program. So pretty cool moment. Good game. And happy now we can move on to better things. No, I'm just playing.
No, speaking of it being a good game, there is an in-stadium hit that I do every year. I've done this. This is my fourth season doing the in-venue stuff for the national championship. We do a final 2-minute timeout hit, and it's supposed to be with the CFP trophy. And the original script is like, got a couple minutes to decide where this bad boy is going to go home. And the last 3 years, the game has not been in the balance late. Like the first year I did it, it was Georgia TCU, and it was an absolute demolition. So to actually have that be the case last night was awesome. We will get into the nitty gritty, the details of this game. We'll hear some of that heartfelt reaction from the post game, but let's set the table like we always do here on Money Moves. Producer Justin, time to run it down.
It's time for the top headlines and topics of the day. This is The Rundown.
All right, JVT, let's quickly run through everything we've got on deck here. In about 30 minutes, we're going to be joined by our mid-major maestro. VSiN.com managing editor Adam Burke going to come in studio in about 30 minutes, get his best bets on college hoops, as well as an early wager he's already got in pocket in the NFL for conference championship weekend.
Yeah, he's our mid-major guy, but we're going to have to put that cap to the side a little bit today because it is rife with some power conference games that are absolutely fantastic. But one mid-major contest that we will see today, I cannot wait to get his thoughts. Kent State playing host to Miami, Ohio. They've maintained their undefeated record over the weekend. Does it end tonight? I kind of think it does, but we'll find out from Adam when we talk to him in a little bit.
I'm about it. Adam actually said maybe we need to shift on the calendar what day of the week that he comes on the program so that we can ensure we get some more of these mid-major programs. Of course, as I mentioned, though, the divisional round, we'll talk plenty of NFL news as well as the coaching carousel that continues to be on the move. We'll react to Robert Saleh reportedly going to the Tennessee Titans, Jeff Hafley, new head man here in Miami as head coach of the Dolphins, but also plenty of hoops and hockey tonight. JVT, we've got 8 games on the ice, 7 in the association, and some big news for the Golden State Warriors.
Yep, say maybe a season-altering injury for Jimmy Butler. Looking forward to actually a hockey card as well. I've looked into it a little bit. We are now getting that time of the year where we got to give everybody a little bit of love, and we got to trade for a team that is making a push for the playoffs as well to analyze. So looking forward to get your breakdown on some of those games, and I have thoughts as well on some of the NHL.
Oh my goodness. And futures bets galore, I hear from you, that we'll get into a little later on in the program. But as we opened the show, let's kick things off with last night as the Hoosiers hoist the hardware. Indiana making history with its first national championship in program history. They complete the perfect season, 16-0, beat Miami in their own building here at Hard Rock Stadium, 27-21 the final. So Indiana wins. Miami ultimately covers the 7.5. Tough loss on full game unders. I know that was a popular play, one I discussed on the show yesterday when I came on with you. That 47.5 after just 11 points were scored in the first half of this one. The early game unders I gave out on the show, the first half, second quarter, those come through. Big picture though, I thought this was just cool that the Hoosiers entered the season a 100-1 long shot to win the title. According to sportsoddhistory.com, they're the biggest preseason long shot to claim the title since at least 2001.
Yeah, it's interesting because, and we have a little bit of obviously revisionist history, but look, this was a top 20 program going into the year. So it's not like this was a complete shock. So it's very funny to see that. The whole journey here, Stormy, I brought this statistic up yesterday. The fact that Mark Fletcher is the first running back to have 100 yards against Indiana since the Old Dominion game against them to start the year. Like, this journey that Indiana has gone on through the course of the season has been tremendous, but a well-fought game. And look, I thought what the interesting aspect of this was, it was a somewhat sloppy game, but both Fernando Mendoza and Curt Cignetti coming off of a game in which they looked perfect, immaculate. Obviously, the statistic of Fernando Mendoza, more touchdown passes than incompletions heading into this game in the college football playoff. They looked mortal. Fernando Mendoza was getting pressured. He was getting hit. It was not as perfect through the air as it was the last two rounds. Curt Cignetti, I thought, was making a ton of mistakes with some of his time management. And yet at the end of the day, they still got it done. This team that did at one point looked like, as we kept calling them, UConn. Football's a hard sport to dominate over the course of 3 straight games. And sure enough, they looked a little bit more like me and you, but still were good enough to get it done against Miami.
Yeah, it very clearly wasn't their best performance offensively. And we saw Mendoza getting beat up too. Bain and Mesidor were all over him. He was being pressured. But I think in the biggest moments, we saw the Heisman Trophy winner have several Heisman Trophy worthy moments, none bigger than, of course, the 4th and 4, the 12-yard touchdown run. That image at the goal line is going to go down in Indiana lore forever. I can't wait to see Wes Reynolds get that poster in his backdrop when he does his home hits moving forward. And in that moment, too, if you remember, Cignetti had the field goal unit out there. He resets and says, let's go for it. Talked about it in the postgame, how he saw the coverage they had on the previous play, said they knew and put the call in specifically for this game and that coverage, and it worked out. And as I talk about Mendoza getting beat up, it was cool to hear Cignetti on the podium after this was all said and done, really crediting his quarterback for his toughness.
Now, let me tell you, Fernando, I know he's great at interviews and comes off as the All-American guy, but he has the heart of a lion when it comes to competition. I mean, that guy competes like a warrior. And, he got really smacked a few times in this game. That one drive we kicked the field goal, there should have been 2 roughing the quarterbacks and 1 high hit to the head that weren't called. I'm all for letting them play, but when they cross the line, you got to call them.
Holly Rose even posted pictures of his arm after the game. But I thought in a season, especially when a lot of people were a little bit critical about, what the options were for the Heisman Trophy winner this year, I thought he really had some I proved that I'm the best quarterback in the country moments in that game, despite the overall numbers.
Sure. I mean, you don't deserve all the credit on a back shoulder connection, but how about the 2 back shoulder throws on key downs late in that game as well, where they went back to old reliable, right? And he completes both of those passes. He had done very well. You mentioned it. That's a high moment when you not only can run that in for the touchdown, but the play call, getting them in that coverage where you're talking about all the pass rushers being out there and them going upfield thinking you're dropping back, but that's not really the case. Look, I think Heisman, there's conversations about how weak the Heisman candidates were this year. The numbers weren't sexy, but you talk about the moments where you're supposed to deliver, and you had those last night and throughout this run for Mendoza. I kept saying, too, Stormy, that game against Oregon, we think of Heisman moments as high leverage games. I thought that was a Heisman moment. He was throwing the ball everywhere, and they needed to be in certain spots 100% of the time. He was putting them where they needed to. So, no, this was a dominant run. I don't really think there's any question about it. And I guess you somewhat solidify and validate a Heisman Trophy here for Fernando Mendoza in that one moment and in this run for a national title.
And now, of course, likely to be the number 1 pick in the National Football League draft that's going to be coming up this summer. I also was curious your opinion at the end of the game, the move from Cignetti not to go for it. Because we talk so much about how useless a 6-point lead is in football. And I actually said on the sideline in that moment, I was like, is this kind of disrespect to Miami that he just doesn't think that they have it in them to drive down the field and score? Because he was right. I mean, Carson Beck has the game-sealing interception. Jamari Sharp ices the game, and Indiana nails it to close the thing out.
Yeah, I mean, he was right to an extent, but let's not forget Miami was driving before that interception by Carson Beck. So, no, that was one of the couple of mistakes that I thought Cignetti made throughout the game from a game management standpoint. You look at the end of the first half where they, for some reason, elect to run the ball when they get the ball back with a couple of timeouts in the pocket, let 20 seconds burn, then they complete a pass, and then he decides to call a timeout at that point, doesn't really know what he's doing there. I thought that those were a lot of interesting moments. And again, like you said, look, a 6-point lead is meaningless to an extent. Yes, it gives you a lead and they have to get a touchdown. But when you're up by 3, in those instances, teams tend to be a little bit more safe. They're not going to be as dynamic. And if you give up the score in a 6-point game, you're likely losing, as opposed to in a 3-point game, should you give up that field goal, you still have a shot in overtime. But look, it worked out. I think a lot of people that really like to rely on results would go, see, it didn't really matter. But it did. And I'll say this really quickly on that final play from the interception standpoint. One of the things that I brought up yesterday, and I think you and I have talked about this throughout the season, Carson Beck has done a very good job, but very clearly with that elbow injury and the Tommy John, he had not really had the zip on the football throughout the entire year. And that final play was very indicative. I actually thought his guy was open, but he just did not have the arm strength to put it where it needed to be. It floated on him and he got picked off and they lose the game.
A tough finish for Miami after they finally get back to the national championship for the first time in so long. But credit where it's due for Indiana and what they did in this turnaround the last couple of years. Some numbers for you before we hit the break. Before Cignetti's arrival, Indiana went 136 seasons without ever winning 10 games or a title. They had 713 losses, the most of any program in college football. The 3 years prior to his arrival, IU was 9-27. Since he's gotten here, they are 27-2, back-to-back 10-win seasons, a Big Ten title, and now national champions for the first time. And another thing I loved hearing from Sig in the postgame was just talking about how happy he was for the fans and that winning at Indiana can be done. His quarterback, by the way, already changed the LinkedIn immediately. Now he's got the Heisman Trophy and National Championship MVP. Okay, you hear that music. We got to take a quick time out here on Money Moves, but we are just getting started. Indiana and Ohio State already co-favorites for next year's title. We got to shift gears, get into some hoops when we come back here on the program.
So you're listening to this podcast because you want an edge. But what if I told you you're only halfway there? You've got the mindset. Now it's time to get the toolkit to match. Here's the thing. Pro bettors spend thousands on data and tools, but what they don't want you to know is that you can get the same edge for a fraction of the cost with VSiN Pro. VSiN Pro gives you access to expert picks, public betting data, prop projections, powerful tools, analytics, and more. Just tap the link in the description and see why thousands of bettors are already using VSiN Pro to cash more bets.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
All right, we are cruising back here on Money Moves, VSiN, the Sports Betting Network, Sirius XM Channel 158. Stormy Bonantoni, Jonathan Von Tobel with you as we roll along here in reaction to what was yesterday's national championship out here in Miami, where I'm broadcasting from. JVT out there in Vegas. Indiana getting the first win in program history. And from an odds perspective, JVT, I mentioned it last segment, they were 100-1 shot in the preseason. Looking ahead to 2027, Indiana is a co-favorite with Ohio State at 7-1. So they are looked at very, very differently from a future standpoint after what they've been able to put together this season.
Yes, and they're rightfully so. I mean, they have a lot, obviously, coming back, but what they've done in the transfer portal seems very, very strong. I have reservations about what Hoover is, Josh Hoover coming from TCU, but who am I to question what Cignetti's done with these quarterbacks these last couple of years? So they deserve to be up there for what they have done. I would say what I find interesting, you depend on where you're looking at here. We've got 850 on this one. This is 2027 National Championship. I was looking somewhere today, Stormy, where Miami was 20-1. To win the national title next year. Now, this might have been adjusted if the assumption is that Darian Mensah is going to be out there, but still, that's going to be pretty interesting because Miami's schedule sets up relatively nicely. If you're talking about the Hurricanes' opponents, they will have to go play Notre Dame and Clemson, but after that, it's an ACC schedule that doesn't have a lot of big speed bumps. Depends on what you're going to get from Florida State, for example, if they're going to bounce back. If Wake Forest becomes a little bit more of a monster as they continue to improve. But some winnable home games and some good opportunities to put some very strong pelts on the resume. I don't think Miami's done yet here either. So I'm going to be interested to see what that run's going to look like for the Hurricanes too.
No, you're correct. They are at 20-1 right now on the odds board. And I agree with you. I think that's a position that could be worth looking into. I was actually a little bit surprised. And granted, it's not like the odds are significantly different from 7-1 to plus 850, but that Oregon wasn't kind of more automatically assumed to be one of those top three favorites on the board with Dante Moore coming back.
I think so. We went over this, Mitch and I today. One of the things that I think does stick out next year for Oregon, their schedule. Have you seen their opponents? Like this is a bear of a schedule here for Oregon. They've got to go to Illinois. They have Michigan on the schedule. They have Ohio State road trip on the schedule, USC road trip on the schedule. So that's a pretty tough regular season slate. That's probably factored into it. Also, I mean, is it fair? You know, the way that I put it is, you know, you used to work in the service industry. If you had like a meeting to attend or something like that, there'd be a big bulletin board in the back with the little cork board. They'd put, hey, you know, meeting here, or let's discuss this. You're probably putting on the cork board, like, do we trust Dan Lanning? Like, we don't have to have the full conversation, but we at least have to put it on the board and put it to everybody's attention. And I think that's part of it as well. But another year, Dante Moore, the returning skill positions that they have, I think they're going to be a threat. But those are some really tough opponents on this, namely having Michigan, Washington, Ohio State, USC, and Illinois on the schedule. And a couple of those being road trips is going to be difficult.
Yeah. And although I'll say, just as we're going down the Miami comp as well, that's a fair question that's probably on the cork board for Miami as well, with Mario Cristobal, the history that he's had, even making it all the way to the national championship. Still plenty of questionable moments along the way. Real quickly, before we move on, the Darian Mensah stuff. So how does that work with the contract that he signed at Duke, the $4 million a year that he's supposed to do? Because I believe the NIL, like, that's not, he has to resolve whatever is going on with him at Duke if he wants to earn NIL money from another school. And they're suing him for this because he initially announced that he was returning and then changed his mind and flipped the commitment.
Yeah, I'm the only question. Look, we don't know the details of this. Did he sign anything, or was it just agreed on? You know, what's going to happen here? I'm not a lawyer by any stretch, but if you're Miami, do you just go, look, kid, we got a lot of money. Just eat the lawsuit. We'll pay it for you. Like, I don't know if you can do that, but like, can you? I have all these questions about what it is. You make that face, but why wouldn't you? It's the Wild West.
No.
And if you're Miami and you have the financial backing, dude, yeah, we'll eat it. We'll call it a buyout clause or whatever it is. We'll look at it as that. We'll ship off the money. You come here and, because look at, to build on this, if you get Mensah, look at the returning skill position they have, right? With Fletcher and Tony coming back. Like, this could be one of the best offenses in the country. Yeah, I think you're willing to bite that bullet if you're allowed to.
I don't disagree. I'm just saying it's freaking insane to think that's the stage that we're in college football right now. And that's a conversation that we're even having. Like, we need, and I hate being this person, but give me regulation. No. Like, give me contracts. Let's make sense of all of this. The fact that we opened the doors to NIL and the way that players are being paid without anything in place to have it actually make sense is ridiculous to me. Neither here nor there. We do have major news in the NBA that I know we need to get to. So let's set it up for you, because if you are a Golden State Warriors fan, I am sorry. Jimmy Butler reportedly suffering a season-ending torn ACL in the third quarter of yesterday's win over Miami. Wow, everything's coming back to Miami today. Worth noting, Butler, of course, has had previously 2 significant injuries to that same right knee earlier in his career: meniscus tear in 2018, MCL sprain last year. The injury comes as the Warriors are playing really well, JVT. They won 12 of 16 games. They're climbing back in the standings. So what does this mean for them moving forward?
I mean, I think it means that they're an option to miss out on the playoffs is what it could potentially mean here. You've mentioned it. They have been winning a little bit more over the last 2 weeks. I think over the last 15 games, they were 7th or 8th in terms of net rating. So they had really started to at least figure some things out. But now that you don't have him, you're really hurting for another secondary creator. They're a team that had been sniffing around some of these other pieces. Some of the names have been thrown out there, Stormy, were Michael Porter Jr. I think today, and this is probably in lieu of the injury, going out and getting a DeMar DeRozan type now, maybe in the cards. But none of the pieces that I think that you're talking about here are one that will, I think at least, push you to get to the counter, to wager anything positive, we'll say, on the Golden State Warriors. I think really what you're looking at is for them to potentially miss the playoffs. But I'll tie my favorite team into this as well, because, of course, I have to make it about me. But I think this does actually connect. Just last week or a couple of days ago, we got news. Kawhi Leonard, he injured his knee. He got sent back home from the road trip that the Clippers were on to take care of what was going on with this knee issue. the reason why I bring that up is if we throw up these standings, you don't see a Clippers logo because they're not in the top 10, but they are right behind Memphis when it comes to that 10th seed in the Western Conference. And should the Clippers be able to force their way into this picture, because they have been playing some incredible basketball, and you look now and you realize that, oh, hey, by the way, and I'm sorry, that is incorrect. The Clippers are in control of the 10th seed right now due to tiebreakers. But you're talking about a play-in, Stormy. They could have the Suns, the Lakers, the Clippers, as maybe the Rockets if they slip out of there. And of all these teams that we're mentioning, for Golden State, with just Draymond Green and Stephen Curry, I think it's going to be a tough hill to climb. So I think there's a reality where they might get eliminated here in a play-in situation. We will see. They're 2 games out of the 6th seed, so they still could make their way out. And the middle of the West looks pretty soft, but I think that this is pretty doom and gloom for Golden State if they're not going to try to add to it. And the other part, Stormy, is, look, they can't go get a massive name. Karl Anthony Towns reportedly is on the block for the New York Knicks, who we'll talk about in a moment. But you can't really add him because you have all these machinations of the cap and the salaries and matching those and taking on all that money. And you already have these 3 big contracts in Jimmy, Dre, and Steph. So there's just so many different things here where I don't think that you're realistically adding something tangible that's going to make you better post Jimmy Butler knee injury.
Yeah, Golden State minus 300 to make the play-in, minus 200 to make the playoffs and get in from the play-in. So maybe potentially worth a look at the no on that. Also, just to cement what you said about the Clippers playing so well lately on a 6-game win streak right now, won 13 of the last 15. So see if they can continue to build on that. The Warriors are in action tonight, second half of a back-to-back against the Raptors. Still favored in the game, but worth noting, and we'll go through the full slate a little bit later. The odds have come down from Golden State minus 6.5 to as low as minus 2.5, currently sitting a 3.5 point favorite. Total also come down about 4 points from 228.5 to 224.5. But you mentioned it, the Knicks. So elsewhere in the NBA, an embarrassing loss for them at the Garden, not only losing outright as a 13-point favorite, but getting blown out. They were booed walking off the court at halftime against the Mavericks, fell behind by 30 at that point, 114-97 the final. This all despite the return of Jalen Brunson as well.
Dude, listen to this starting lineup. Dwight Powell, Caleb Martin, Najee Marshall, Cooper Flagg ended up playing, and Max Christie. I mean, the Mavericks played nobody yesterday, and they absolutely smoked them. It was embarrassing. I think we have this from Mike Brown. Listen to what he had to say in the press conference afterwards, a little fired up about what the problems were for the New York Knicks.
Bottom line is we gotta lock in. We gotta do our job for 48 minutes. They scored 75 points in the first half. And at halftime, we usually do the clips and talk about technical X's and O's and all that, crap that coaches do and teams do. There was nothing to be said at halftime except for lock in and do your job.
Look, this team is sliding. Their defense has been abysmal. Now there's rumors that Cat might be on the move here. This is a very winnable Eastern Conference, as I think the takeaway is. We've said this now for a while, and the Knicks, who looked like they were going to be gift-wrapped to the conference at this point, now you look around, the Pistons are very viable to win this thing. Should Tatum come back, they are viable to win this. There might be a team that could maybe make a run that is based out in Charlotte, North Carolina. Who knows what's going to happen in the NBA? But the East is wide open and very weak right now.
We'll get into that more a little bit later, but it has not been good for the Knicks. 4 straight losses, 2-9 straight up and ATS since December 31st. We got to step aside when we come back. VSiN Zone, Adam Burke going to join us on the program.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Big Game 60 is right around the corner, and we got a big deal for you. You can save $60 off a VSiN Pro annual subscription when you sign up using promo code MONEY. Become a VSiN Pro annual subscriber. Bet smarter all year long, folks. Get the daily best bets, the real-time DraftKings and Circa betting splits, the AI-powered prop tools. I think our player prop stuff is some of the most underrated things we have on the website. Matchup analysis and more. Go to VSiN.com/subscribe. Use the promo code MONEY. Save $60 off a VSiN Pro annual subscription today. That's VSIN.com/subscribe. One of the many things you get up on the website, plenty of articles from Zach Cohen and the man to my left, Adam Burke, our managing editor over at VSiN.com. I will say that I believe, Stormy, managing editor sounds like a lesser title than senior editor, so I don't know why you don't have a better title.
I don't know. It's a good question. Should maybe editorial director? Should I just go with that?
Ooh, that sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that
Who cares
sounds
about
like your
titles?
Boston
Just
title.
get the man more money.
I mean, I'm not going to cross into that.
Yeah, I'm gonna stay out of that conversation.
That's it.
Well, I noticed like Stormy's got the Nike swoosh going on there. Like, are you guys trying to get a show sponsorship or something?
I would like that. That would be great. I'm actually wearing, so I have you can see the little CFP logo here. They gave me a full sweatsuit. So it's like, I've got like the outfit that the guys wear for their media day thing. I look insane, but I like it. I can dig the vibe.
I believe I got in trouble for wearing a hoodie the other day, and yet here we are. We're wearing a full sweatsuit.
So I think this is different. I'm not in studio where you're supposed to look a certain way, right? There's a certain decorum that you have to have in studio that's a little bit different on the road. Every time you do a hit from home, you're wearing a hat with a flat bill. Come on.
Untrue. I did my hair today, although there was a problem with my backdrop, so I was actually audio only. But these are details that we do not need to bother our audience with.
I do really appreciate that TJ Maxx artwork backdrop for Stormy in that hotel room there. Looks good.
All right, enough out of this. While I am in Miami, though, let's actually kick things off here talking about a little national championship last night. Indiana gets it done. They finished what was such a dominant run in the playoff in a game that wasn't as dominant. Miami gets the cover, but still, for historically what this program has been, for them to get that win, what did you kind of take away from watching this whole season and seeing them finish the year that way last night?
Well, I mean, I think it was pretty clear, once they beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, that they were the best team in the country. And I know the Buckeyes didn't look good against Miami, but, Ohio State was a very strong team throughout the course of the season. And, with Indiana doing what they had to do to hold on and win that game, running themselves through the table in the regular season. And then, look, the playoff draw was pretty kind to them, if we're, being honest here. I mean, getting Alabama, we saw what being a number one seed can do for you by getting Alabama in that first game. And then, of course, pummeling an Oregon team. And by the way, I was listening when you guys were talking about Dan Lanning. Yeah, I think it's a very fair question to ask about Dan Lanning winning big games or even being competitive in big games. But, look, I mean, the Heisman Trophy winner wins the title. Signetti wins the title. He can continue mean mugging everybody on the sideline and mean mugging every camera and all that. All I cared about last night is Miami plus 8.5 came through. That's all that mattered to me.
Yeah, it's like it's one of those things to bring the service industry back again. When somebody throws their back out, lifting something too heavy, you just kind of put up a reminder. And then if it happens again, you kind of have send out hey, guys, come on now. If it happens a third time, we have to have a meeting about this and discuss what's going on. And, Dan Lanning has thrown his back out twice, to keep the analogy going here at this point. All right, let me ask you this. National championship odds for next year. I don't even need like some nuanced thought about all these teams. I'm just curious. Will you invest in futures like this far out? How much does it have to be worth? I mean, you have to have like I would assume a pretty big edge if you're investing in like 7-1 today, January 20th. But will you take some long shots this far out?
Yeah, it is something that I may think about. And in fact, I did write an article over at vsin.com this morning with the college football national championship odds for next season. And yeah, I mean, look, tying up your money for 370 days because the national championship isn't until January 25th next year. Fortunately, Stormy shouldn't have to travel for that one. You got
never know
7-7, 7.5 to 1, 8.5 to 1, 9 to 1. Like, I'm not tying my money up for more than a year to play one of those numbers. Sure. Like, I'm going to try to go out there and hope that I can find. I don't know if I even necessarily want to say this year's Indiana, but like, I don't know what Virginia's price was going into the season last year, but they were beating a 5-loss Duke team away from going to the college football playoff, by being the ACC champion. So that's kind of what I wrote about in that article. And one team that I think, kind of stands out a little bit in that regard would be a team like Houston, who's 200 to 1 to win the national championship coming out of the Big 12. But yeah, I think Texas Tech's going to be really good. And, obviously they get Brendan Sorsby from Cincinnati, which should definitely help them. But I still think the Big 12 is wide open enough where if everybody kind of beats everybody, you can be a 2-loss team in conference, make it into the college football playoff. I think similarly, a team like Louisville could do the same thing, right? Be a 2-loss team in conference play, maybe even a 3-loss team in conference play, and get into the conference championship game. And then I can at least monetize from that point forward. So right now, I'm not trying to pick the winner of the national championship game. I'm trying to pick a long shot that can get into the playoff, maybe get a home game, maybe be able to win a game, and then give me something I can monetize as the tournament goes along.
Really quick, Stormy, before you jump in, I just wanted to note, because we did get an update here for what it's worth, since we're talking about futures for next season. Darian Mensah's attorney, Darian Heitner, tells On3 that the judge ruled from the bench this morning, pending a written ruling denying Duke's request that Mensah be enjoined from entering the transfer portal. So this is actually kind of big, considering that if Mensah goes back to Miami, Stormy, this is actually a very big piece for the Hurricanes to potentially be one of the better teams in the country should they land him.
Huge, Adam. And I want to get your reaction to this as somebody who is as into college football as we are. That is, I mean, this whole situation and the stage that NIL and players getting paid is at right now is insane. But for a judge already to say, hey, actually, like, Mensah's fine. You guys don't have rules like this. He can do what he wants. And what that impact would have on a program like Miami, I think is massive.
Yeah, I guess I'll say twists and turns of the college football portal. I mean, it's just insane. And when you start getting some of these rulings on the books, right, you wind up getting legal precedent for some of these things, then it just opens the floodgates that much more. I mean, the floodgates have already been open. The levees have been broken for this thing for the last couple of seasons already. And of course, going back further than that. But now when you start getting legal precedent involved, then there are more things that maybe you can challenge. If you're a program that wants to acquire a player, it's basically what this is, just player acquisition. If you want to try to acquire a player, or a player wants to get out of his agreement, something like that. I mean, this is just, it's a mess for all of us to try to figure out, let alone what these universities, these agents, these players all have to figure out. So it's just going to continue to get more and more complex as we go forward. And look, I mean, I think the dispersal of talent across the country made for a really, really interesting regular season. And of course, here in the playoff so far with the expanded playoff, we've had a 7 seed, an 8 seed, a 10 seed, and then of course the 1 seeded Hoosiers. So yeah, it's just going to continue to get more and more crazy out there. And again, once legal precedent is on the books, then it's just a complete free for all.
All right. Stormy, anything college football left? I would love to change direction to college basketball, but I don't want to change too quickly if you've got something left.
Well, because we've got a lot of college basketball actually to hit. Let's do that on the other side of the break, because I do know that Adam has an NFL play already in pocket for conference title weekend. So Adam, actually, let's stick with football here. What did you fire on already?
Yeah, so look, I mean, this was kind of a similar situation to playing last night's game, the national championship, where I just thought the line was too high on Miami, a defense that's really, 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 really strong. I think the line is too high here in New England and Denver. This Denver defense is really, really good. And even though we didn't see it last week, against Josh Allen, which, I mean, Josh Allen's a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. Maybe Drake May is this season. He has been, but go ahead and prove it to me on the road in a playoff game. So I took the 5.5 with Denver. I realized that Jarrett Stidham, you're going to have questions about him. The running game hasn't been great. RJ Harvey really hasn't been that impressive as the feature back. Maybe they get J.K. Dobbins back. Who knows? But like, Stidham is a guy who at least has played the position at the NFL level a few times. There's a reason why Sean Payton was okay with having him as the backup. And again, this is a Denver team that was number 1 in the NFL in yards per play allowed. And the only reason that they didn't shine more in the defensive metrics is because they only had 14 takeaways. But again, they were number 1 in yards per play. So I think they can ugly this game up. I think 5.5 is just too high in this one. I think it's an over adjustment to the Knicks injury. So I went ahead and took the Broncos here.
See, I'm not the only one that thinks like this. It's not an anti-Bo Nix thing. It's a number thing. Yesterday, she tried to call me out and said, I know you like the Broncos because Bo Nix thinks. I was like, well, it's not that. It's just, it's a little bit of a strong move. It's 7 points.
Okay, I think both things can be true, JVT.
Which is?
That you think Bo Nix stinks and it was an over adjustment. Like that is possible. It's both things.
I mean, stinks is somewhat.
You're just mad because I can read you like a book. That's all it is. Adam, can we get weird and tease both dogs up this weekend?
I mean, when you're looking at the way that scoring's done now in college or in the NFL, where you've got, more 2-point conversions, more 4th down attempts, stuff like that, you still want to get 3 and 7 as your key numbers, but 7 and 10 are still relatively key now in the NFL, with taking Denver up from 4.5 or 5.5 to 10.5, 11.5. I don't think it's a bad idea. The Rams and Seattle game, the total 47.5 makes me worry a little bit, getting the 3 and 7 in there, because this could be a game that kind of ends with a two possession final, But I don't hate it. I mean, yeah, you're not getting 3 and 7. It's not a traditional teaser with that New England and Denver game, but you are still getting some important numbers with a low scoring total and a great Denver defense.
Well, I'm not a particularly traditional person, so I don't hate it. Adam is sticking around with us. As JVT set up, we got lots of college basketball to get to. Even though there are a lot of ranked teams in action, Adam still found a way to play some bets. We'll get to that and more coming up on Money Moves.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSIN, the Sports Betting Network.
Back here on Money Moves, VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. Stormy Buonantony, Jonathan Von Tobel with you. Adam Burke, kind enough to stick around for another segment. VSiN.com managing editor joining us in studio out there in Vegas. I am still in Miami for a little while longer after we get off the air, though. I'll fly back, be back in studio with JVT. I know he's very excited for that. Let's get into a little college hoops, though, here, Adam, because I love the text you sent me earlier this morning that there were, quote, too many good games for your liking tonight.
Yeah, these are not the nights I like in college basketball. You know, I've talked about this before where it's like, it's really hard for me when you have two good teams because they're both probably going to play well, right? And one team's just going to play better than the other, maybe make a few more threes, something like that. That's going to decide the game. Whereas I think there are much greater edges to be had betting the low majors and the mid majors, the one bid leagues, stuff like that, where there's actually, you know, significant talent gaps between these teams, significant coaching gaps between these teams, much different styles of play, stuff like that. So I prefer the nights where we have, you know, a lot of the, you know, where the hell is that school? I've never heard of it before types of games. But I was able to find some stuff tonight where we actually have, you know, some marquee action.
Okay. But first, let's scratch the itch then. Okay.
Sure,
because I think a lot of people would agree with me here. The premier game from a narrative standpoint, I want to watch this. A little bit of an in-state rivalry here. Miami, Ohio is on the road against Kent State.
Yep.
Miami, Ohio has won 19 to start this thing. They are coming off of a 105-102 dramatic victory against Buffalo that was at home. Why am I not? This is a 1.5 point spread in favor of Miami. Situationally in college basketball, I feel like this screams Kent State. They might be walking into a little bit of a hornet's nest here with this undefeated run coming off of a last-second win in overtime, now having to play an in-state foe, the Golden Flashes.
Yeah, and also Golden Flash's head coach Rob Senderoff is buying everybody's first beer tonight if you're a student. So there's also that. So it should be a pretty raucous environment there. I can't read, can't spell Kent State. Go Zips. But yeah, I mean, this is a really, really interesting game for a variety of different reasons, especially because, you know, for Miami, I mean, what they're doing is exceptional, and they're doing it largely on, you know, predicated on their offense, which every time they go on the road now, I kind of get worried about, right? There's definitely negative regression built into what they're doing from the floor. I mean, they're shooting over 61% on twos, shooting almost 40% on threes. Like, that's not sustainable. And furthermore, not sustainable when you're playing in these different shooting backdrops, different sight lines, all these kinds of things. So I can understand why Kent State looks really attractive tonight. It's not a game that I played, but it's obviously one that I did look at. Again, I do think, though, that the line move towards Miami, with a lot of people probably thinking what you're thinking, maybe tells the story here a little bit. So, by the way, I would say I almost laid the price with Akron against Buffalo. Speaking of a bad situational spot. Can
I add to this really quickly, Stormy? Because one of the other statistics that does stick out about Miami, Ohio, they are an abysmal offensive rebounding team. So to your point about unsustainability, they're not even generating second chance opportunities, Stormy. They're literally just a one-shot offense that has been hyper efficient. And now you get Kent State, who actually is a relatively solid rebounding team that can actually get some second chance opportunities and, of course, keep you off the glass. So if you're one and done in a foreign environment, like you said, in a different shooting backdrop, if the threes aren't falling, like, I feel like there's more than just this situation, some opportunity here on the glass and on the floor for Kent State to get this done tonight.
Yeah, I think so too. And one thing I will mention as well, and this is an angle that I've looked at more in terms of the NHL and the NBA in the past, but when a team is on a big winning streak and they finally lose a game, I like to fade them in the next game too, because like, you're cruising, right? Everything's going awesome. And then all of a sudden you lose a game and you're kind of like, oh, we're not impenetrable. Like, you know, we are vulnerable. And then maybe you over adjust to what caused you to lose the previous game. So for example, I mean, they'll be laying a massive number in a week against UMass at home, But I'll probably look at the Minutemen in that game if Miami does lose this one, even with a week in between.
Yep.
I still think it's one of those things where maybe you just kind of over adjust and try to do a little bit too much in the next game.
JVT, when we get to best bets later, Kent State better be on the graphic. That's all I'm going to say. Before we get to some of these other top 25 teams, though, you do have one other mid-major, one of our favorite conferences in the Mountain West, and an Air Force team that is 3-15 on the season, riding an 11-game losing streak, losing a lot of those games by margin. You are taking the points with today. Why do you think it's too many in CSU?
Yeah, I feel like I had to include at least one ugly bet for today. But there is a method to the madness here with this one. So a couple of things, right? First of all, so Air Force suspended their head coach, Joe Scott, for alleged mistreatment of the cadet athletes. I don't know what it takes at the Air Force Academy to upset players enough to get suspended, but it has happened with Joe Scott. So now John Jordan takes over, a longtime assistant. I don't know anything about him. Maybe the players will be happier to play for him. Yeah. They came out pretty good in their last game. They were up 16-7 and then gave up 21 straight points to Nevada, which gives you an idea of how bad this team is. But the other thing about this game is that Colorado State is the slowest team in the nation. Their adjusted tempo, according to Bart Torvik, 61.9 possessions. They are remarkably slow. Air Force is happy to play slow. They're perfectly fine with that. And they're getting a 20.5 point or 21 point head start in this game. So the thing about Air Force is they found out about the Joe Scott thing Saturday morning, then had to play Nevada. So I'm pretty sure it just kind of all had to set in a little bit. I think they come out with a decent effort tonight. And again, it takes a lot of efficiency on both ends of the floor in a game likely to be played to 61 or 62 possessions to win by 20 plus. So I took Air Force tonight, and I can tell you, I will not be watching my bet in this game because it's going to be awful.
It is. I'm with you. When I saw this too, I was like, man, I don't even know if there's just going to be enough possessions for Colorado State to pull ahead by that amount. And if you do like Colorado State, I mean, I think you're hunting for some Air Force team totals under. I mean,
yes, exactly.
They're not going to be able to score if that's the case. All right. What about Oregon? I had somebody get mad at me over the weekend because I asked Tim Murray the question of who's the worst coach in the Big Ten. And I said, could it be Dana Altman? Ooh. Because the edge has fallen off mightily for Oregon and Altman now. They've lost 4 straight, and now they get to play host to Michigan State following a loss by 10 points to Michigan over the weekend.
Yeah, and this is a really important talking point here for everybody who's just now getting into college basketball. Now that college football is over, you're going to be looking for things to bet. Maybe you don't want to bet the NBA because you don't like the load management thing and the late scratches and all that kind of stuff. Maybe you want to play college basketball. So you really want to pay attention to what's happened here recently for these teams. And one of the big reasons why Oregon has struggled as much as they have is because Jackson Shelstad and Nate Biddle are both out. And those are their 2 best offensive players. Shelstad also, a big piece defensively for them. He not only helps them take care of the basketball, but also helps them on the defensive end of the floor. This is a scary number to lay. Laying 10.5 with a road team a long way from home in a late tip-off here like the Spartans are, playing in Eugene tonight, 9 o'clock Eastern time tip. It's a tough situation for them, but they are very, very efficient on both ends of the floor. Oregon is terrible on both ends of the floor right now with those big injuries that they're dealing with. And I think for Michigan State, at this point in time, you're a tournament team, right? Tom Izzo knows that. They're very, very good. They've got the necessary wins on their resume, stuff like that. Now you're starting to think about seeding. And if you can blow out a conference opponent who is a decent team in Oregon, yes, you got to apply the context of guys being out. Mm-hmm. But if you can blow them out, win this game by double digits, you're very happy to do that. There's no look-ahead spot. They play Maryland at home coming up this weekend. I like Sparty to put a beating on the Ducks here. I like Michigan State minus 10.5.
We have a Tim Murray sandwich spot special for Texas Tech coming up tonight facing Baylor. They're coming off the win over BYU. They've got number 6 ranked Houston coming up on Saturday, only laying 1.5 in that spot. And if you didn't have the context for those other 2 games, you might look at that and say, 1.5, what am I missing? Is that still too short, though, for a Texas Tech team that's been playing so good?
Yeah, so I like Texas Tech in this game. There's a few reasons why. The first is one of the things I like about, Bart Torvik's website, and I know everybody uses KenPom, and I'm sure you can do this over there too and do a lot of different things with their tools, but I want to look at teams' performance against the type of opponent that they're playing tonight. So what I looked at was Texas Tech and Baylor and what they've done against quadrant 2 or better opponents. So you're thinking basically like top 125-ish types of teams, depending on where the game was played. Texas Tech is dramatically better shooting the basketball in those types of games than Baylor is. Over 36% from three, nearly 54% on twos. Baylor is well behind that. 45.6% on twos in these types of games, 34% on threes, which is still good. But Scott Drew even came out after the last game and was like, yeah, we got some guys struggling to shoot the basketball right now. And we don't have that guy that can go out there and have 7 or 8 assists in a game and set these guys up for open looks. So that tells me Baylor doesn't have a true point guard. Drew is not very happy with that situation right now. And when you play a Grant McCaslin coach team like Texas Tech, they are going to make you earn every single possession offensively. And if Baylor doesn't have a facilitator, doesn't have a floor general, Texas Tech does. And I think that's one of the big reasons why the Red Raiders win this game tonight. So I took them minus the 1.5. And look, all 4 of Texas Tech's losses are quadrant 1A games. So elite level competition in road or neutral settings. Baylor's not on that level. Give me Texas Tech tonight, minus 1.5.
Yeah, and Baylor reeling a little bit as of late anyways. 1-4 their last 5 games straight up. Adam, as always, thank you so much for the time. We appreciate you. We'll see you again next week, hopefully with some more mid-major madness. We got a step aside kicking off hour 2 of the program coming up after this.